My family and I were talking the other day about hospitality. It's very big in Italian culture. But they were remarking the difference between my parents' and my grandparents' generation to ours, especially when someone comes and visits unexpectedly. Back in the day, front doors were open and people would knock saying that they're in the neighborhood, and you would bring them in and there would be what they called Entenmann's cake laid out, and they get the coffee and something called Sanka. I don't really know what that is, but they said it was laid out for them. But then they were commenting how in our generation, and particularly my brothers and my sister and I, whenever someone would ring the door, we would all go and hide. And we would just wait and try to be really quiet. And if they kept knocking or ringing the door, we would look and go nose goes to see who would go and answer the door and be the unlucky fellow. So that's just a difference between how we treat guests then and now. Maybe you can relate to that. But hospitality in the Hebrew culture, in the ancient world, was a virtue. It was a virtue and looked upon, if you didn't do it, as a sin because of the fact that it was a sharing with others. By sharing your home, your sacred space, you shared your very self. And people would travel all the time, and there weren't hotels or inns. They would rely on the generosity of others, especially prophets and priests. And so we hear Elisha blessing and rewarding this woman who lives in the town of Shunem because she has opened her doors to this prophet. She has opened herself and her family. She's even made a room for him under her roof. And it goes to show that God desires, and we even hear in the gospel, God desires for us to share ourselves. Why? Because he has already made a room in his home. Not just heaven, but in the place of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, this communion of love. God has opened himself and desires us to share in that home, to share in his very self. And that door is the crucifix, is the cross. The passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus has opened that door to share in communion. And we take part in it through all the sacraments, especially baptism. We hear St. Paul saying, by baptism, you enter into Jesus. And by entering into Jesus, the Father and the Holy Spirit. But it's not always easy entering into one's home. I've experienced that myself, trying to visit others during this time, just to stay on the outside. And I remember one parishioner, hearing that I was going around and visiting, said that she was afraid because her house was a mess. And she didn't want me to come in and see the mess. But my brothers and sisters, God has already come into our mess. By his very incarnation, Jesus has entered into our fallen world, and he did so willingly. And every time he comes in the Eucharist, he comes into our fallen world because he so wants to abide in our roof. He so wants to abide in our souls, mess and all. So on our part, we have to first receive him, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Receive his grace and the Holy Spirit. No matter what we've done, no matter where we are at in our journey of faith, receive him and his love, because that's the only way we will be able to encounter others in their mess, with no fear, with no disgust, with no timidity. We'll be able to enter in and share God's love. Now, you may be wondering, Father, how can we do that, start visiting people's homes? We're still walking trepidatiously in COVID. But there's many different ways. I know for myself, I've been writing notes to people in the parish and friends that I've known before I was a priest. Those are ways that your messages of love and support can get to people. With all the many technology, you can call people and let people know that you're there, that you're thinking of them. And just having a listening ear, being able to close one's mouth and listen as people divulge themselves. They share their joys, their struggles, their very self. Those are ways that we can accept people and then bless them by our prayers and support. But again, we cannot do that until we first enter into God, or should I say, we first let God enter into us. And we have the perfect opportunity to do that today. Because as we hear before receive or communion, actually we all say together, priest and people, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof. But only say the word, and my soul shall be healed. We are asking, we're giving permission for God to enter in. And I ask that you ask for that grace wholeheartedly. Every part of your roof, every part of your soul, let God come in and heal. And so, empowered by that love, go out and be hospitable. Invite people into your own lives. Share the faith with others. Share God's love with others. And watch and be amazed how they open up more and more, not only to you, but they'll begin to realize, if they really love me, God must really love me. And they'll open up to God, and person by person, family by family, we will all be transformed. Because the love of God will be in us. And growing in that hospitality, that Christian hospitality, we may enter into the joy of the Lord one day when we abide with him forever and ever.